When you finish a painting, what you have there is art. When you compose a sonnet, that's art. When you play a fugue on a flute, that's art too. When you take a picture, that's a snapshot, unless, of course, you're Ansel Adams. Here's Ed Bradley with A Portrait of an Artist.
Yeah, I think this is really hot stuff.
Don't think for one moment that this man is just your run-of-the-mill tourist making instant prints along the California coast at Point Lobos. He is Ansel Adams, and at 77, he is our most famous photographer. He has spent 50 years capturing some of the most dramatic vistas of the American West. What he saw and the way he captured it has made him a millionaire, although dealers make far more from his work than he does. After decades of photographing in Yosemite, the Sierras, and the Southwest, and a lot of commercial photography to pay the bills for many of those years, Ansel Adams is now hot stuff.
I call it the in syndrome. The great curse today, I think, is the in syndrome. You have to be in. There has to be a cult. There has to be a way of doing things.
Are you in now?
No, I'm not in. I'm out. I hope I'm not in. I suppose I'm in it myself, but...
You've got a show coming up in
Oh,
New
I'm
York.
in the popular sense.
You're more successful financially than you ever have been in life?
Well, but...
Does that make you in?
No, not with the contemporary intellectual world, this world of the present critic, but I think I'm classed with Norman Rockwell.
How so?
Majority of photographers, especially the Eastern, the urban types, they call it, landscape to them is just a postcard. They just don't say. I've been accused many times of being just sort of a sublime postcard photographer. Sublime because the picture's bigger than postcards. I don't know for the reason.
If Ansel Adams makes picture postcards, he must have been commissioned by the Almighty. A major exhibition just opened at the Museum of Modern Art in New York and will tour other American cities. There are 153 photographs, some going back 50 years.
He knew something nobody else knew. It has to do with the sense of that landscape and what it means and how it works by living in it, by climbing these mountains, by really sleeping under these skies.
John Szarkowski is the museum's curator of photography.
To me, the early work is so lyrical, private, intense. Later work much more public, more dramatic, more willful. This print reminds me a little bit about the Dylan Thomas poem to his father about rage against the dying of the light. I mean, by the time you've spent that many years at it, I think it's proper to take a riskier, more willful stance toward your work, toward the world.
There's no question now of his fame and stature. Hundreds of people crowded into the museum's garden to welcome him to New York, and hundreds more lined up at a Fifth Avenue bookstore to pay $75 for his latest book and to have him sign it.
How's that?
Okay. Your name's the most important piece.
Oh. Once somebody had to come up.
Driving along the Pacific coast near his home, Adams said you learn to live with fame.
Tooling up 54th Street in New York. Great, big, tall, black man with white hair. Very fine face, very broad grin. So stopped and looked at me, and his jaw fell, and he walked over and extended both hands. Well, I never thought I'd live to see the day when I'd meet Hoot Gibson in the flesh. And then tooling off down the street. I couldn't have a lot to tell him. I had the Stetson on.
Adams has a sense of real modesty. He's good. His work is the standard in landscape photography, and part of his genius is working in the subdued light of his darkroom. He's been known to spend days working on one print. From a negative he's printed for years.
What's more important for you? The exposure, going out and making the exposure, or coming in here and making the print?
Well, it's all part of the same thing. You have a visualization of the picture you want. You see something and you say, this is the image I want, so then you expose accordingly. You develop the negative accordingly to get that effect. And then I have an old cliche in which I say the negative is like the composer's score, then the print is the performance of the score. So you don't do it the same every time. You come very close, or reasonably close, to what we call the standard. I mean, the feeling of this is very definitely what I wanted, and I got it. But the prints aren't exactly alike.
Several years ago, the word went out to dealers and collectors. Put your orders in now because Ansel Adams is about to stop printing, except for museums and other non-profit collectors. The response? Well, for the last 3 years, with a little time out for open heart surgery, he's been trying to fill those orders. As always, working 7 days a week.
I read somewhere that at a point when you were still considering the choice between your music, I think you were a pianist, right?
Yeah.
And the camera, someone said to you, don't give up the music. They said the camera can never capture the soul or express what is in the soul.
It cannot express the human soul. Well, camera might not, but maybe the photographer could try. See the rocks in the water? Mm-hmm. Those rocks are slightly heavy. That's better, a better balance. That's pretty good, but a little thin here. Mm-hmm. And that's too thin. You begin to lose the feeling of the substance of the rock. So that, I would say, I wouldn't use that. This how this is burned out.
So you discard
compared to that. So I just discard that. Mm-hmm. Or four-way extinction.
What do you do with your rejects?
They are destroyed. Everybody's asking me, oh, don't throw it away. Even if it isn't good, I'd like it, but I can't have bad prints out.
You're a perfectionist now?
Well, you have to be, yes. I wish I'd been in the past. I wouldn't have so many ghosts trailing me around.
What do you mean by ghosts?
Well, a lot of lousy prints that show up every once in a while and have that out.
Is there a lousy Ansel Adams print?
Yes, I'm afraid there must be a great many of them. You know, when you do professional work and publicity work, and, as I did many, many years ago, these things rise up to torment me.
You embarrassed by any of that?
Yeah, frankly. But most people are pretty good about it.
Perhaps his most famous shot is Half Dome. It was also a passage in his life and what was to become his art.
The only thing I can think of is to get a black sky and a deep shadow, and I had one glass plate left and one other filter, a red filter. So did it, and it came out just like I visualized and hoped for, and that was, I could say that was the first time I really visualized and called a shot. But this is the equivalent not of this scene, but of what I saw and felt.
That was the first time?
The first conscious one when I really knew what I was going to get.
Ansel Adams is one of the fortunate people in our world. He loves his work and he loves to work. Asked about a vacation, he mentions a trip he took one Sunday afternoon. That was his vacation. He did talk of going soon to Alaska, but of course the camera goes with him. His work has been and still is exceptional. He will leave us with a tremendous legacy, and he wants it put to use.
We have the Center for Creative Photography set up in University of Arizona in Tucson. And my negatives are all going there. And then one of the instructions with the negatives is that under proper supervision, graduates, serious graduate students can print from these negatives. Because they can't print to sell anything. Couldn't do that with an archive collection. But why in the world give them a lot of negatives they can't touch? And that happens all the time. Stiglitz negatives are all in boxes and trunks. You can't print them. You can't do anything with them.
So
a student can take them out and look at them. But after all, I remember there's people like Frescobaldi and Haydn and earlier composers that wrote music for relatively primitive instruments. I'm thinking about what happens in the next 10, 20 years when you can take the electronic image from the negative, translate it directly from the negative. and perhaps add things that, I know add things that you never would dream of today any more than Haydn could think of a concert grand piano.
Have you ever considered what would be a proper epitaph for Ansel Adams?
Well, I think Alfred Stieglitz's epitaph, he told me he wanted. That's the ideal. It said, "Here lies Alfred Stieglitz. He lived for better or for worse, but he's dead for good." He was marvelous.
And that'll work for Ansel Adams?
I think that's wonderful.